I felt like I was everything everywhere all at once. And the expansiveness that felt like was, it's truly, truly indescribable. And so it was other worlds, it was other realities. I got to see, different beings, some beings that, um, are very similar, like humanoid types, but less dense bodies, more light bodies. I got to see a lot of blue beings. And so it was like this grid structure. And then the planets, stars, all of that, not just our solar system, but all of the different solar systems, were sitting on top of this grid structure. So if you can imagine like a planet sitting here, and then based on its heaviness, the grid structure would kind of hold it to the level to which its heaviness, so it would sink down or up.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Today my guest is Alysa Rushton. Hello, Alysa.
Hi, how are you, Heather? I'm so excited to be here with you and your audience today. Oh, I'm so excited.
I am thrilled to have you because you had a near-death experience that utterly transformed your life, and it really is incredible. So I would love to hear a little bit of the backstory and then take us right into your near-death experience.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, so you guys, I didn't always used to look like this. When I died, I want to start you when I died. So I literally died on the toilet like Elvis. And when I died, I was 240 pounds. I used a walker to get around. I had a PICC line in my arm that delivered medication to me. I was on 28 different medications. And really, my life was off in a mess. I mean, it was just completely in a ditch. And so that's where I was when I died. And I'll tell you all about that. But I do want to give you some backstory. So, backing up about, well, to my childhood, I had all this trauma, all of these injuries, all of these things that had happened to me. And when I was 21, I was actually kidnapped. And that kidnapping was from, I worked at a Fortune 100 corporation, and I got kidnapped by my boss, if you can believe it. And how I dealt with trauma in our family is we didn't talk about it. We didn't deal with it. We just drank a little more, smoked a little more, and worked a little harder. So that's what I did. That's how I knew to deal with that trauma of the kidnapping. And so what ended up happening to me was I just threw myself into work. I worked at a corporate job, and I just threw myself in, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And I started chasing diagnoses and medication to fix. I wanted that quick fix. I was a smoker and a drinker, and I just wanted the pill to make me feel better. I didn't realize that nutrition or being healthy or thinking healthy thoughts had anything to do with how I felt. I didn't realize that trauma had anything to do with the physical body. So, all of that to say that I ended up finding a doctor who said, I can heal you. And what we're going to do is this chemotherapy type cocktail, and we're just going to kill everything in your body. And so that's what we did. And eventually, I rode the line between life and death most days because I was on so much medication and end of life pain management as well. I'm talking fentanyl, suckers, morphine, fentanyl patches, Ativan, Benadryl, these huge cocktails that can kill you and often do kill people. So that is what happened to me one day. It was just too much medication, and I didn't feel well. It was at nighttime. My husband was sleeping, and I went into the bathroom because that's where you go when you're not feeling well. A lot of people do die in the bathroom, and it's actually a wonderful place to die. And I guess I must have sat down on the toilet, and the only reason why I was found there is because there was a wall right next to the toilet, and I slumped over on the wall, and that's what kept me there. But once I died, I had the most magical ride of my life. And that journey upwards was different than, I guess, some people. I had always heard the death journey was you're gonna go to the pearly gates and you're gonna see Jesus or your family, and there was gonna be relatives that greeted you. I had none of that. And I will say I didn't believe in any of that either. So I had been raised in the Christian church, so I did believe in heaven, but I had had a trip when I was 12 where that whole construct sort of broke down for me. And so it shook my beliefs a little bit. And so when I died, I just started to come up out of the body, and I didn't have that thing where you're looking down at the body and you're thinking, "Oh gosh, I'm out of the body." I didn't have that. I think probably it was because I was on a lot of drugs when I died that I sort of had to let go of a lot of the consciousness that was being blocked in the physical body. And then as my spirit rose up out of the physical vehicle that I was residing in, I then started to hit this moment where I was one with all things. And I remember that it just felt so blissful and so filled with love and expansive. And I often say it's the most physical thing I've ever done without a body. I mean, it was like I could stretch my consciousness in all of these different directions all at once and really connect in with other consciousnesses. And while it's difficult to describe the exactly what I saw, the best way I can describe it is imagine if you've seen one of those movies where the security guy's looking at all those different security cameras and he's monitoring hundreds of cameras. It was like that, only it was bubbles, and it was trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of bubbles. And in each of the bubbles, I could go into them. I could perceive, I could feel exactly what that energy was experiencing. So everything from grains of sand to rocks to minerals to Heather's experience to Joe's experience to Dorothy's experience to Sally to literally everything. I could move, and it was I felt like I was electricity in motion. I was this very electrical, it felt very stretchy. I felt very stretchy. I felt like I was everything everywhere all at once. And the expansiveness that felt like was, it's truly, truly indescribable. And I think for me, looking back on that experience, it's really like being birthed into this next world, kind of like a baby would get birthed into this world and be having all this new data and all of these new experience points. The same thing times a trillion 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 on the other side. And so it was other worlds, it was other realities. I got to see different beings, some beings that um are very similar, like humanoid types, but less dense bodies, more light bodies. I got to see a lot of blue beings of light, the Pleiadian groups, the Syrian groups, the Lyrian groups, like all of that's happening all at once. Okay, so you got to imagine this is all, I'm getting it all at once. And one of the things I really remember was that as I was moving into the different consciousnesses, it was a feedback loop. So I was experiencing myself as that energy. Let's just pick like a grain of sand and Heather. So I would get exactly what that thing was feeling and seeing out of its sensory organs. Um, and in your case, that's your eyes and your heart and your nervous system. And in a grain of sand, it's something different. It's like mineral constituents, but they're still sensory organs feeding back. And so I would be able to feel all that and sense all of that. So it was a massive experience because our brains, our human brains can't hold all that much data points at once. But on the other side, because we are not limited by the human nervous system, it was totally easy. The inflow was absolutely flowing through. So it was completely incredible. It was miraculous and amazing. One of the other things that I got to see very clearly was um, how our universe is laid out. So think of the Milky Way and the center. I believe that I was likely the center of the Milky Way, but also I got to view it from a distant point. And so it was like this grid structure. And then the planets, stars, all of that, not just our solar system, but all of the different solar systems, were sitting on top of this grid structure. So if you can imagine like a planet sitting here, and then based on its heaviness, the grid structure would kind of hold it to the level to which its heaviness. So it would sink down or up on this grid flat plane. I know, it was really wild. It was very holographic in nature, and so I got to see that in I'm trying to break this down very linearly, but it didn't happen linearly. I also was seeing that at the same time, we think here on Earth that there's one Earth, there's one timeline, there's one reality that's happening. And I saw the opposite of that. I saw all of the timelines. There was no past, no present, no future. It was all happening all at once. So just stacked one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other. And this infinite possibilities and infinite potentials, and like infinite Heathers and infinite Alysas for our choice points that were happening. And this, so if you can think about like at the soul level, Heather, you're experiencing your Heatherness, but there's also like other parts of you that maybe decided to turn left instead of right, but that's also being experienced and fed back into the one source consciousness. So it was a lot. It was a lot, a lot, a lot. And, but it didn't feel like that up there. It felt amazing and natural. I got to see also how light and sound work together to then inform our reality and create the Milky Way and create on down at the macro and the micro levels, and how we are all informed by light and sound in our physical bodies. And one of the cool healing tools that I got up there is how to work with, so light and sound inform the sacred geometry that then goes to make up our holographic fields. And so if we want to change our body and we don't like something that's happening with our body, we have to change the light and sound that's going and forming the holographic field. And that's now what I teach people how to do, because I learned it up there, but really we can drastically change the body. I also learned and saw up there that, okay, so we think down here there's just one thing happening for us, but what is actually happening, and this is the reason why people don't heal, is that we are operating, our soul point, our point of light is operating. I need some props for this to explain it properly, but if you can imagine, like your soul's up the wrist, and then the fingers come down, and for the ease of simplicity, you've got 5 different lifetimes that are happening. And what happens is at soul level, you're working on some issues to grow through and expand through and learn through, and you're feeding that data back up to divine source energy. But what happens is a lot of people are working at these issues, and maybe it's a money issue, or a fundamental lack issue, or maybe it's a relationship issue. And so they're having 3 to 5 or more human lifetimes happening all at once where this issue is occurring. And so what we actually have to do is we have to shift the energy at the level of the soul. If I'm having problems in my hands, I've got to look upstream. I've got to look at where it's coming from. And we have been so cut off from thinking we're just this one being in a body. We're just this, we think of our soul as like one pinpointed energy in our one body. That could not be farther from the truth. Your energy is, yes, your Eunice right now, but you also have these other lifetimes, human and non-human, that are all happening in the now time. So what really creates catalytic healing for people is taking a look at those other lifetimes that are causing issues, and at the same time taking a look at those other aspects of you that are mastery, that are doing these amazing things, that are working the other parts of the energy frequency, because we're just working energy frequency. And once you learn how to kind of scoop all that in and bring it through, that's when true and lasting healing happens. And you move past some of these more intractable things that are happening in your life. And things really do truly heal. And what I saw up there, and what's really, it's kind of hard to understand as a human being. And even my brain wants to fall out on the floor a little bit. Is that your DNA that is in every single cell of your body is it's the storage unit for your soul's information. And so if you can understand that the DNA is holding your soul's plan, but that soul's plan is bigger than just you. It's a multidimensional aspect of you. And that DNA, we maybe have all heard of the law of attraction, and the you're just be a certain frequency and you can attract what you want. And that cannot be farther from the truth. It is absolutely does not work that way. You can have the most amazing, loving vibration, and your life can be off in a ditch. You maybe not are able to manifest your way out of a paper bag. So, what happens is our frequency is a part of it, but it's more complicated than that. And the DNA that's inside of our physical vehicle actually is what's projecting our reality. And so what happens is that we have all of these reality bubbles, like Heather, you have your reality bubble. I have my reality bubble. And what you see and experience in your reality bubble is informed by your DNA and your soul program. And so what happens though is that our reality bubbles act like a hologram. And so if you can imagine, they're like a Venn diagram, the ones that kind of overlap in the middle. And so our reality bubbles come into contact with one another and they start to intertwine, and then they form a larger reality bubble. And just a really quick example of how this works is in America, we have the reality bubble that we all drive on the right hand side of the road. That is a belief and a construct that we have here. And that's what informs our reality, is that we drive on the right hand side of the road. In other countries, that is not in their reality bubble. So does that make sense? It's this place of where we're holding all this data, it's coming through our bodies, it's informing our reality, and our realities impact one another. So all of that to say that I'm experiencing all of this on the other side. I'm getting these massive downloads. I even got the math. I could see the intricate math. And I'll digress for a minute, but I remember coming back into my body after I got my first dose of Narcan, which they put into me to bring me back. And I remember feeling this feeling of, let me keep the math. I want to keep the math. But on the other side, all of this is happening. I'm getting all of these data points. And then I saw this one beautiful, beautiful ball that I was quite interested in. And I zoomed 100% of my consciousness into that ball. And Now I'm not this expansive consciousness of the universe anymore. I am Alyssa, and I'm back on Earth, except Earth looks a little different. And it was olive green everything. Everything was coated in this olive green color. And I thought about my ex-boyfriends, and instantly I popped next to him. And I tried to talk to him and I couldn't. And I was kind of hanging around him and feeling okay about it. And then I thought about another ex-boyfriend. Both, by the way, were addicts, as I was. And I popped to the next ex-boyfriend, and I couldn't talk to him either. And I was thinking, this is a little weird. And I'm back in my Alyssa body. Only I was back in the Alyssa body that I was in my early 20s, because I died when I was 30, and I died in a 240-pound body. But now I'm in this sort of youthful, very slender body ish, because I didn't really have a body, but I felt like the feel of her. And I realized I couldn't talk to anybody, but it felt very healing. And I didn't realize where I had gone to until years later. I read a book by Savannah Arienta, and she described the astral plane, where people go who die of big trauma, unexpected deaths, suicide, and drug overdose. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly where I was. And she even described it down to the olive green tinge that was on everything. And so I was going to be an astral realm entity probably. And it was a very healing place. And in fact, all of a sudden, this group energy came to me and said, hey, it was a very loving energy. And they said, hey, you can stay here as long as you want and heal, but you won't come back into the Alyssa body. Or you can come back right now. You'll have to come back right now. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it'll be worth it. And instantly I thought, yes, I want to come back. And as soon as I had the thought, yes, it was like somebody physically had dropped me off a 1,000-story building and just slammed down back into my body. And I was, oh, I'm gasping for air. They had just pumped a shot of Narcan into me. And now I'm on the bathroom taking those breaths. And then the reality starts of, the questions from the EMTs, and, where do you live, and what's your address, and eventually what's your name, none of which I knew the answers to.
And ultimately, this led to this incredible transformation that you've had physically.
Yeah. 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 Because I did, I broke into a million pieces at that moment. When you are that sick and you are on that much medication and you die, when you come back, you realize that your life is broken and you have to change it, and what you're doing to fix yourself is killing you. That was my big epiphany. Oh, what I'm doing to fix myself is actually killing me, and I have to make a change. I have to figure this out. I've got to get my life together. And so fortunately, on the other side, I got codes and frequencies and an activation of all my gifts and skills and talents. I thought I had totally had, as I like to say, brain damage. I thought I damaged my brain. I thought I had total brain damage. And because I could see color, I could see frequency, I could see code, I could smell it, I could feel it. I had all these weird extra perceptory skills all of a sudden, and I didn't know what was going on. And in fact, after I got out of the hospital that night, the very next day, I went back into a different hospital where I was infusing again in the chair, just went right back to it. And because my doctor was like, oh, yeah, you need to get right back to it. Don't skip a beat. Let's just get you back on the drugs. And so I was sitting in the chair, and this man's voice was in my head. And I found out later who this was, and I believe he was one of my beautiful, loving guides that came in. His name is Emile Couillet, and he's the father of affirmations. He was, back in the 1920s, he was the first person to really put out the affirmations. But I would hear this voice, and I remember sitting in the chair, and his voice, really loving, came in and said, I'm getting better and better every day in every way. I'm getting better and better every day in every way. And it was just on repeat. I couldn't stop it. Thousands of times a day, this voice. And I just thought, oh, I don't know if I'm hearing voices now. This is, there was a part of me that knew, you're hearing voices. This is probably not awesome. You might have been dead a little too long.
And yet the proof is in the pudding, because look at how those affirmations then led to who you are today.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the biggest things that I took away from the experience too, just for everybody's own edification, is that when we pass on, our consciousness is directive. So it directs where we go. And so I remember reading a book from Ram Dass, and when he passed on, he was chanting the name of God, God, God. And I really do believe that we have been so trained out of our consciousness. We've been so, at least in the Western world, we have forgotten that we are consciousness inhabiting a vehicle for a certain amount of time, just like maybe you drive a Ford for a certain amount of time before you trade it in and get something different. And we don't think about our consciousness like that. And so when we do pass on out of the body, where we're directing our consciousness is where we go. And because I died suddenly of a drug overdose, I didn't know that. I wasn't directing my consciousness, and my consciousness was like, oh, this seems very beautiful, this ball of earth energy. I'm going to go dive into that. And I really think, had I known that I could direct my consciousness someplace else, I wouldn't have run the risk of being an entity ghost in the astral realm of earth.
Your story is incredible. And I've been sitting here jotting down notes as you were talking, and I've got so many questions just about, when you saw those trillions of beings and you could connect with them, and some were from Earth and some were not of Earth. And, you talked about the grid and the law of attraction and so many other things that I want to talk to you about. But let's go ahead and take that into part 2.
That sounds great.
So once again, another amazing guest. What an incredible story that Alysa had. And of course, as you can guess, I'm going to ask a lot more questions and look for a lot more details in what she shared. Here's just a small look.
Horrible things happen here on planet Earth. We have a lot of trauma. We have a lot as a very difficult plane to experience. A lot of difficult circumstances happen. But on the other side, there wasn't that sense that we have here. It was expansion. It was the sense of, ooh, expansion, ooh, growth, ooh, data coming through. If you took a bad piece of code out of your computer and it was being funky and your command button didn't work, or your control or shift button didn't work, and you took that code out, all of a sudden that button's going to work.
And of course, I'm going to ask so much more. I mean, she covered so many things. I mean, we learned about the sound and light. We learned about time, kind of everything happening at once, connecting with so many other people at once. She talks about healing coming up in part 2 and how we can heal ourselves. So really fascinating stuff ahead. I'd love to know your thoughts on what we already covered. So please put those in the description. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to say, I made it, that is another way that you can connect. And I so appreciate all of you that do leave something in the comments. It really helps the channel. Thank you so much too for your likes. I appreciate those. If you know someone who may like this, go ahead and share it with a friend and subscribe if you haven't. The little alert button, the little bell there, that'll tell you, or alert you, I should say, when new episodes are out. You can always also find all of my episodes in the description, and new ones come out every Tuesday and Thursday. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I do hope you'll join me for part 2 because I ask a lot of questions and she has some great answers. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.